Senator Whitehouse watched 4 judicial nominees refuse to confirm Biden won in 2020 or that January 6th happened, under oath in a confirmation hearing, and told them directly they looked ridiculous. Then he exposed something more alarming. The Marshals Service, responsible for protecting federal judges who are receiving threats, won't investigate beyond the person who utters the threat. They won't follow the conspiracy, the funding, the organization behind it, because it leads to right-wing networks this MAGA Justice Department won't touch. Judges are being left exposed, and the people organizing the threats are walking free.
Just to finish Senator Blumenthal's point, I hope you realize how ridiculous the 4 of you look. Spouting these preposterous, canned answers in a forum in which A, you're supposed to tell the truth, and B, you're supposed to demonstrate the judicial capacity to make independent, factual decisions in hard cases. If you can't even sit here and say that Joe Biden won that election or that the Capitol was attacked, what's left? What's left if a hard case comes your way as a judge, and let's say the Trump administration is bearing down on that? Why would we ever believe that you would give the litigants a fair hearing and a fair decision if the executive branch was leaning in on you when we can't get a reasonable answer out of any of you with the executive branch leaning in on you to give these ridiculous answers today? I'm really sorry to have to go through this and that you have to go through this. But it would be nice if you could tell your executive branch handlers, for instance, Ms. Clark, I'm supported by Lindsey Graham. He's a friend of President Trump. He's the second senior person on the Republican side in the Judiciary Committee. He's likely to be the next Judiciary Committee chair. I think I'll be okay. I don't need to make myself ridiculous at your direction. It'd be great if you could have said that. It would be great if your answers were simple and honest here today. It's really disappointing. Let me ask a different question, a legal question. A judge, you want to be judges. A judge gets a threat to the judge's life or to the judge's family. Can you imagine a scenario in which liability may attach to individuals beyond the utterer of that threat? Ms. Clark?
Senator, as a prosecutor, there are instances where there's some responsibility that is assigned to someone who is not the utterer of a threat to an individual. And so to answer your question, yes, I can imagine.
Do you agree?
Yes, Senator, and if confirmed to the bench, I would follow all Supreme Court precedent and Ninth Circuit precedent.
Mr. Rick, do you agree?
Yes, Senator, I would agree with that.
I don't know that I care what you think, Ms. Westerkamp, because you're going to international trade and you're probably not going to see much of this, but do you agree?
Yes, Senator.
Yeah, and those doctrines that would provide the legal basis for investigation in those scenarios would include doctrines like, name one, Ms. Clark.
Senator, doctrines that are, if someone is essentially carrying out
solicitation, would that be
yes.
one? Solicitation
yes.
of a threat?
Yes.
Or a conspiracy out of which the threat emerged, would that be another one?
Yes.
Yes. How about, and it's the product of an enterprise under the racketeering statutes. Would that also be another way that liability could extend beyond the utterer?
That is correct, Senator.
Can you think of any others, Ms. Lane, where liability extends beyond the utterer of the threat? What are some of the legal theories that would support that kind of investigation and prosecution?
Senator, the doctrines you mentioned, I would agree with, and I would just look always to the federal law and federal statutes guiding that.
Mr. Recchi?
Senator, I would agree with that. I think you covered the major ones, conspiracy, RICO. There may be other avenues of potential legal liability, but I think you covered the three big ones in that scenario.
Ms. Westerkamp, you agree?
Senator, I'm not aware if there are any more. With my practice before the Court of International Trade and Court of Federal Claims, it doesn't touch on criminal law.
So here's why I asked you these questions. I asked you these questions because right now federal judges are under the worst shadow of physical threat in my lifetime and perhaps in the history of this country. And in responding to those threats, we have the United States Marshals Service, which reports to the Department of Justice. And I have now over a dozen times asked the Marshals Service, will you investigate behind the utterer of a threat if the evidence justifies it? That's a super easy question. The answer is, yeah, of course we will. They won't answer that. They won't answer that. And I point this out because judges across the country need to pay attention to the fact that the Marshals Service won't confirm that it will investigate behind the utterer of a threat if the evidence supports that. And why would that be the case? That would be the case because when you get behind the utterer of a lot of these threats, you run into right-wing conspiracies. And this MAGA Department of Justice would rather not go there. And so they leave judges exposed with investigations in which they aren't doing investigative 101 work that you've all identified as plausible legal theories. And we need to fix that. We need to fix that.
There is a moment at the beginning of this hearing that should be played in every law school, every judicial training, every ethics seminar in the country. Senator Whitehouse looks at 4 judicial nominees and tells them directly that they look ridiculous. He tells them they're spouting preposterous canned answers. He tells them they're supposed to tell the truth. They're supposed to demonstrate judicial capacity. And they can't even say that Joe Biden won the election. They can't even say that the Capitol was attacked. They can't state basic facts that have been proven, litigated, certified, and confirmed by every relevant authority. And if they can't do that, Whitehouse asks, what's left? What happens when a hard case comes before them and the Trump administration is bearing down? Why would anyone believe they would give litigants a fair hearing when they can't give a reasonable answer in a hearing with the executive branch leaning in on them? It's a devastating question, and the nominees have no answer. They can't answer, because the answer would require them to break with the political script they've been given, to say something that might upset the people who are putting them forward, to demonstrate independence before they even get the robe, and they won't do it. They'd rather look ridiculous. They'd rather give preposterous canned answers. They'd rather let a senator tell them to their faces that they're embarrassing themselves than say something true that might cost them a confirmation. Whitehouse offers them a way out. He says it would be nice if they could tell their handlers, I'm supported by Lindsey Graham. He's a friend of President Trump. He's the second senior person on the Republican side. He's likely to be the next Judiciary Committee chair. I think I'll be okay. I don't need to make myself ridiculous at your direction. It's a plea for backbone, for independence, for the kind of judicial temperament that isn't afraid to state the obvious. It goes unanswered. Then Whitehouse pivots. He asks a legal question, a straightforward one. A judge gets a threat. Can liability attach to people beyond the person who actually utters the threat? The nominees, suddenly on firmer ground, answer easily. Yes. Solicitation, conspiracy, RICO. They name the doctrines. They agree with the legal theories. They sound like lawyers again, comfortable in their element. Whitehouse thanks them. And then he tells them why he asked. Because federal judges are under the worst shadow of physical threat in his lifetime. And the Marshals Service, the agency responsible for protecting them, won't confirm that it will investigate behind the utterer of a threat. He's asked them over a dozen times. A super easy question. The answer should be, yes, of course we will. They won't say it, and Whitehouse knows why. When you get behind the utterer of a lot of these threats, you run into right-wing conspiracies. The MAGA Department of Justice would rather not go there, so they leave judges exposed. They do the investigative equivalent of arresting the guy who pulled the trigger and never asking who gave him the gun, who paid him, who sent him. They stop at the lowest level. They protect the networks. They leave judges to face threats that originate not from lone wolves, but from organized conspiracies, from people who understand that if they stay one step removed, they'll never be touched. Whitehouse is laying out something that should terrify every federal judge in the country. The people responsible for your protection won't do the basic work of investigating the people who are actually organizing the threats against you, because that work might lead to people the Department of Justice doesn't want to investigate. The 4 nominees just agreed that the legal theories exist. That conspiracy is a crime. That solicitation is a crime. That RICO is a tool. They know how it works. They know what should happen. But it's not happening. And it's not happening by choice. Whitehouse ends with a call to fix it, to do the investigative 101 work that the nominees have all identified as plausible legal theories, to protect judges from the threats that are escalating around them, to hold accountable not just the people who utter the threats, but the people who organize them, fund them, encourage them. It's a call that almost certainly won't be answered, not by this Department of Justice, not by this administration, not by a Marshals Service that won't answer a yes or no question, but it should be. Because the judges who are being threatened, the ones who are supposed to be independent, who are supposed to decide cases without fear or favor, who are supposed to uphold the Constitution even when it's politically inconvenient, they are being left exposed. And the people who are supposed to protect them are choosing not to. That's the system Whitehouse is describing. A system where judicial nominees can't state basic facts, where the Marshals Service won't do basic investigations, where the Department of Justice protects right-wing conspiracies rather than investigate them, where judges are left to face threats alone, and where a senator, after years of trying, finally loses his patience and tells 4 nominees to their faces that they look ridiculous. Because they do. Because they won't tell the truth about things that happened. Because they won't demonstrate the independence they'd need to be good judges. Because they'd rather look ridiculous than risk their confirmations. And because the system that produces them, the system that protects them, the system that leaves judges exposed and threats uninvestigated, that system is broken. And until someone is willing to fix it, it's going to stay broken.